right, this week here on Mastering Dungeons, we are going to continue our look at Daggerheart, which could have dungeons that you could master, but we are going to look this week at characters. Teos and I are going to talk about our characters. Oh, yeah. Settle in, folks. It's time. Yep, he's got the cards. I've got the, what do you call it, Nexus, Demi-Plane
Demi-plane.
Nexus up.
Yeah.
And so we thought we would look at character creation through the lens of our creation of these characters, talk about the process we went through, and give some thoughts on it. I need to give the standard warning here that we are analyzing rules. We aren't commenting on designers or philosophies
Hmm.
or any of those things. We are focusing in on rules. It is a narrow focus. We understand that there is choices to be made and preferences and all those things. This is not to denigrate anyone. This is just the analysis of rules and a look at game design and this game through that spectrum. We love the game. We wouldn't be talking about it if we didn't. We know that there's other things that go on around the rules, but that's what we do here.
Yeah.
We look at rules regardless of who wrote them or why they wrote them. We just need to see how they work.
No, we really
Cool.
like Daggerheart. We hate Shadow
Yep.
Dart.
apparently,
No, I'm kidding. We
apparently,
don't. We love it.
you,
We play it. But
again, we wouldn't be talking about Shadow Dark if
yeah.
we didn't like Shadow Dark.
Yeah. When you started doing a
So
disclaimer, I just assumed you were going to say that we don't wear pants. And I was like, wait, we don't need to share that. But
I believe that's a given.
yeah. Yeah.
So what did we do? We made 6 level characters, and then we played them. I played for 1 week. Teos played for 2 weeks as Tom Christie ran us through an adventure that he created for 6 level characters over at D20 Play.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so what I'm going to let you start this,
Yeah.
Teos, with the getting started section.
Yeah, so we're going to go through the process of creating and kind of share our characters. This is just a giant episode that's an excuse to talk about our characters. No, really, it's about examining that character creation process, which is really neat. Like, it's really different. So getting started is encouraging you to have a session 0. And we kind of did that a little bit through Discord. We tossed ideas around and shared some concepts, and Tom guided us because we were doing an online play. We knew that we were not using a particular campaign frame, which we'll talk about in a future episode, but campaign frames can have big impacts on the characters. And we thought about our character concepts. And for me, I was thinking like maybe I want to do a spellcaster, or maybe I want to do a rogue, which actually the first playtest I did of Daggerheart was a rogue. I did a ribbit rogue. I thought maybe I want to do another kind of rogue. I looked at the warlock, which is in playtest. It didn't really grab me, though it had some neat ideas. So I came back and eventually went towards rogue. Any thoughts here?
Yeah, my process was a little bit different than Teos's. Mine was I kept an eye on the Discord to see what other people were playing. And then I realized, oh, I've got about 15 minutes to make a character. Let me do this. And I assume Teos used the book.
I
and
did.
cards.
I wanted to, even though I had Demi-plane access, I wanted to try out the book process. So I did that.
Yep. And I did not have the book. So I strictly used Demi-plane.
Nice.
And I did purchase it on Demi-plane so I could take a look at all the options. But my focus was I have to do this not in a matter of hours, not even a matter of minutes, but a matter of seconds. So I didn't like explore every option.
Gotcha.
I just skimmed them. What looks cool? That's what I'm choosing. Let's see how fast we can do this.
Nice. And Demi-plane can be lightning fast, right? It's really great. I'd say more streamlined than your D&D Beyond 5e process. Do you think that's true? Or similar?
I would call it even. I would call it even.
Fair.
I can make a character on D&D Beyond super quick, but I also know the rules.
Yeah.
This took me a while, and as you will find out, I don't think I did things quite right.
Oh. Okay.
And I don't think Demi-plane did me any favors in terms of maybe some suggestions. There were some suggested things, but
Mm-hmm.
there were also some things where I'm sure the software is sound and correct,
Mm,
but me as a completely, not quite completely new, but quite new user,
sure.
I may have missed a couple of things that made the character not quite as correct as it could have been.
Did you go straight to being sixth level?
I did.
That's probably the biggest thing because,
Yeah.
and yeah, there's some things around choosing your weapons and
Yep.
leveling that I
Yep.
could see could lead you astray. The
And
book
that's
is a
exactly
yeah,
where,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
one thing I'll also mention in this getting started section is that you can get these cards like the one that I'm holding up here, and I'm going to attempt to show this off without dumping this all over the place. But when you buy the physical edition, you can get this tray of cards that is full of all the cards you need for the game, all the character class options, all of the, like I was holding up this community card being Wildborn from the wild. And that's really neat. The book, if you just get the book or just the PDF, you get that PDF version. In the book, it has a short version of them. Places like Demiplane, you get to actually see the physical cards in digital form, and then there's the card generator. So there are a lot of ways to see or print the cards in addition to getting them
Yep.
physically.
Yep. It is. I love Demiplane and its interface and how it displays things. So we'll talk about that too.
Yeah.
So we got started. We chose our class, which is the first step in the process. And it says each class is a role-based archetype.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the bard, the druid, the guardian, the ranger, the rogue, the seraph, sorcerer, warrior, and wizard.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, and that
any
role
thoughts on
based,
that?
yeah, the role based part is interesting. They mention, well, two things. One is that the class doesn't really say in its description, "Oh, it's this role," but they make an offhand remark in this section about like, "Oh, if you want to be a tank, right, go with the guardian." And so it's sort of interesting where you go like, well, druid is often a class that can be a lot of things. So what is its role? Am I a spellcaster? Am I a tank? Am I? And it was interesting. They didn't quite like fourth edition label them, right? Which is
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, and again, love the game, but this is one of those things where the reason we look at the rules is
mm,
because there's a little bit of marketing lingo, a little bit of jingoism about, oh, this is a narrative game. Oh, this is and this game does this. And so we dive into the rules to say, does it really do it?
yeah,
If all we look at is the rules and not the marketing, if we look at only the rules and not what a game master might bring on their own, what does the game tell
yeah,
us about itself? So I will
yeah,
get that disclaimer in there one more time and off we
yeah.
go.
And sometimes a game begins doing one thing, and then that language sort of remains. But it's only when you step back at the end of the project that you realize, wow, I really meant to emphasize that one thing, and we never kind of did, right? And
Mhm.
this just happens in games.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
but yeah, and so the a really neat thing that I think is it's not the only game to have ever done this, but it's still very innovative, especially with how it goes about it, is not in the book, but in the free download PDFs, there are class specific character sheets.
Mhm.
And by and large looks like all the other character sheets, but there are these little bits that have either numbers already placed for you or they
Mhm.
explain things to you and make suggestions to you. So the actual physical character sheet that you get has all of these comments on them that are very helpful. And then you also get this thing that is called a sidecar. And the sidecar, you can move to one side or the other of the character sheet. Let's see if I can pull this up for folks watching the video. But you kind of move it to one side, and it shows you
Mhm.
the corresponding place, so that you can see like, okay, that's my class, and that's my evasion score, and those are my armor slots, and this is what they do.
Mhm.
And then you can slide the sheet to the other side underneath your character sheet, and it explains the
Yeah.
other half of the character sheet. And that's really brilliant. So that combo of
Yeah.
class specific character sheets and this sidecar, really, really cool.
So what Teo showed to everybody who doesn't see, essentially if you're reading text and there's like a sidebar that
Yeah.
explains the text that you are reading right now. It's this exact same thing, only it's on the character sheet, and it actually the second sheet points to the sections that it's referring to make it crystal clear with where the explanation starts.
Yeah.
All
So
right, so yeah, go ahead.
yeah, level one is where they say to start, and the game kind of strongly recommends you start at level one, which I also thought was interesting. You know, it's a choice to kind of say that. First step is name, pronouns, description, and we get some ideas for these that are on the character sheet. Then, so I chose rogue, and what'd you do?
I chose warrior. I had played a sorcerer in a previous play test that was level
Mm.
2, so I wanted to try a non-arcane, non-spell casting, I should say,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
version of a character to see how it went.
Nice.
Yep.
Uh, each class has a hope feature you can activate by spending 3 hope, and then you have class features. So for my rogue, the hope feature is called Rogue's Dodge. I can spend 3 hope to get a +2 bonus to my evasion, which is kind of like your armor class, until the next time an attack succeeds against you or until your next rest. And then my rogue features were cloaked. Anytime that I'm hidden, I'm cloaked. I get all the benefits of being hidden, but if I remain unseen if I'm stationary when an adversary moves to where they would normally see me. So like if I'm behind a barrel and I'm hidden and they come around, I'm still hidden. And after I make an attack or end a move within line of sight of an adversary, I am no longer cloaked. I don't want to get too deep into hidden, but I will say that this game has problems with its hiding rules, just like 2024 and just like 90% of the games out there where they do not address, like, you know, this great benefit sounds so cool. And then I go, well, wait, if I take a shot at someone, I think I've revealed myself anyway. So this is just like the smallest of benefits for the weirdest of conditions where if nobody has ever seen me but happens to come around the corner, I can stay hidden. That's kind of the only benefit. And then I have sneak attack, which works a lot like D&D. A number of D6s, in this case, equal to your tier, get added to your damage roll when someone's next to your target or when you're hidden or cloaked or that kind of thing.
Yep. I played the warrior, so my 3 hope spend here was called No Mercy. I spend 3 hope to gain a +1 bonus to attack rolls until the next rest.
Nice.
So that's pretty much it. Once you turn it on, it's a constant +1. And what I learned was if you roll poorly, that +1
It's true.
will not mean a thing.
Yeah, you hit nothing all game long, basically.
Yeah,
I think once you hit her, maybe.
It was pretty close. The other 2 abilities were attack of opportunity. If an adversary within melee range attempts to leave that range, I can make a reaction roll using a trait of my choice against their difficulty. And then if I succeed, I get to choose one of the following 3. If the test results in a critical success, I get to choose 2 of these following 3. And those things are I can either move to follow them where they are, or they can't move from where they are. So I stop that movement. I can deal damage to them equal to my primary weapon's damage, or I can move with them. So one, you can do if a success, do one of those things. 2, do 2 of those things. But 2 of those things are contradictory because I can't move with them if they can't move.
True.
So really what it is you can either do damage and stop them or do damage and move with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
The question that came up was, this is a reaction roll, which I don't think is the same thing as an attack.
So I think the big difference for the reaction roll is it does not generate hope or fear on the roll.
Okay.
Though Matt Mercer ran it and then did that. So, but I think he was just making a mistake in one of his games. But yeah, that should be the big difference there. There may be other things that can trigger off of a reaction roll because it is a reaction roll, but that's the big difference.
Okay. Because there are certain things that I can do if it's an attack, but I'm not sure if that reaction roll counts as an attack. So, it's
Hmm.
these little things. And again, I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
not
Good
delved
question.
deeply into this. Maybe it's all in there. Maybe it's
Maybe.
clearly laid out and I just missed it. But that's a question that came to mind that I did not have a chance to
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
The second of the two extra abilities here is combat training. You ignore burden when equipping weapons. And when I deal physical damage, you gain a bonus to your damage equal to your level. So when I dealt physical damage, I could do an extra 6 points on top of everything else. And as I was reading this, I was like, okay, burden. Burden. I don't have time to look this up right now, so I'm going to continue.
So that's the number
And
of hands it takes.
correct. And so when I got to equipment, I had forgotten that this was a thing.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if I did it right, but we'll get to that when we
Okay.
go to equipment.
So you could have, I guess, in theory, hold a two-handed weapon in one hand. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think.
Yeah, I think
But
that's
yeah,
what it's saying. So, like a longsword in this game is two-handed,
two hands, right?
but you could have held a longsword in one hand and a shield in the other, or a dagger
Correct.
to boost your damage. That's cool. Okay, neat.
But then, so if we're gonna delve in, we'll delve in because you just brought it up. So then, what I tried to do was equip a second weapon,
Oh.
right? Because if I had the long sword equipped, and I would click on longbow, and it wouldn't equip the longbow. Or it equipped the longbow, but it took off the long sword. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So then I equipped the long sword, and then tried to equip a dagger, but it unequipped the longsword. So I
Yes.
thought, okay, that can't be right. It can't be that I can hold the longsword in one hand and a dagger in the other. Otherwise, it would let me equip both because on the character sheet, it also had like primary weapon, secondary weapon. And the
Yes.
secondary weapon kept saying, go equip a secondary weapon. But when I went to equip it and it kept doing that, I'm equipping the previous. So I'm not sure if that's a bug, if I wasn't doing something right. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. So weapons are classified as primary or secondary. It's possible that this rule, what it's saying, doesn't change primary secondary. So you would have had to put a secondary one-handed weapon. So like a longbow is not secondary. So you couldn't have
Right.
put it in your secondary
But
slot.
a dagger isn't either.
No, a small
Okay,
dagger is.
gotcha. Okay,
So
so
that may
yeah,
be
so
it. It may be a case
yeah,
where if you had been doing this on paper, you would have shown up at the table and like halfway through someone would
exactly.
have gone, wait a minute. And here the
Yeah,
software is enforcing that it's got to be a secondary weapon in
yeah.
your offhand. It just, yeah.
And to be completely clear out there, this isn't a complaint. This is
Yep.
me
Yep.
putting something together in 10 minutes and
Yep.
not being able to do deep research. Uh, so you have your class now with the abilities that come with it. So you get to choose a subclass and some subclass features. What were
Mhm.
what were your choices for the rogue Teos?
So I could have been a night walker, which is like manipulate shadows to maneuver through the environment, or syndicate, a web of contacts wherever I go. I was gonna go night walker for sort of the obvious, like more thiefy type of stuff, but then I realized that with my character concept, which is high school princess, I really wanted this web of contacts, particularly because I was playing a level 6 character. Whenever we do leveling up, I'll get into that, but so what that meant as syndicate is my spellcast trait is finesse. That's actually true of both of the subclasses. So not all classes have a spellcast trait. This means I can use spellcasting weapons, and I use that particular trait when casting domain cards that are spells. And then I have a foundation feature of well connected. And basically, anytime I show up in a town or environment, I know somebody who calls this place home. I can give them a name, note how I think they could be useful, and choose one fact from the following list, such as we used to be together. It's a long story, which is probably what I'm going to choose 90% of the time for this character.
Yep.
But yeah, so that I thought that was great. Just storytelling, fun, right? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. And as a warrior, my two subclasses were Call of the Brave and Call of the Slayer. Call of the Slayer, with the one sentence description of each, Call of the Slayer sounded a lot easier to manage. Call of the Brave sort of said, like, you draw strength from your opponent's, damage or something. I'm like, no, I don't want to
Worry
base
about
my,
that.
yeah, so I'll just do the Slayer, which seems straight up easier to do. So what did I get because I chose Slayer? I got a pool of dice called Slayer dice. If I rolled with hope, I could place a d6 on the card. And it's funny, it says place it on the card, even though I'm going on D&D Beyond. Maybe, or on, you
Hmm.
know, maybe there was a check mark I could have done to place it on the card.
Yeah.
But so I add that d6 to the card, adding it to that Slayer pool, rather than banking hope. Then when I make an attack roll or damage roll, I could spend any number of those Slayer dice, and I can have a number up to my proficiency, which was +4 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I can roll them and add their result to the roll. At the end of the session, any unspent Slayer dice are gained as hope instead.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
really
that,
useful.
yeah, it was useful. And if you hit, you can use them, which I didn't really find out about.
So
Or
little
roll with
detail.
hope. Yeah,
Mhm.
which I rarely did.
Mm.
But
Mm.
overall, it seems really fair. It seems really balanced. It seems like a
Mhm.
good, oh, I'm going
Fun.
to really pile
Mhm.
on the damage, or I really need to hit here. So let me spend some of these D6.
Yeah. Cool. That was
And then
step one.
heritage is next.
Yeah.
Yep, heritage. That was step one. Step two is heritage. Heritage includes two elements: ancestry and community. Uh, for ancestry, there are 18 different options, and then most exist in a form that's we've seen in previous games, including D&D. And the ancestry comes with a feature. And then community, there are 9 options currently representing culture and geographic origin, with a card with some abilities provided there. They don't necessarily have any specific languages. It's assumed that everyone speaks some common language and a sign language. But any regional or other languages are up to the game master or the party.
I thought that was
So, what
interesting,
did
right?
you?
Like that's
Yeah,
like let's just get rid of languages. Like,
yeah,
you just all speak. Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I'm down. If you want your game to do that, I am totally down with that. If you want your game to go in the other direction, I'm totally down with that too. There are people that love both things. I think more commonly, no pun intended, is just we don't want to deal with differences in
Yeah.
language, so let's just get there.
Yeah. And choosing them, if it doesn't matter, then is a waste, which sometimes it feels like in
Precisely.
5e. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I went with a fawn, and the fawn is pretty sweet. So it's your goat-legged type creature, which has a couple of neat features that I got not just for the sweet goat look. Caprine leap. I can leap anywhere within close range as though I were using normal movement, allowing me to vault obstacles, jump across gaps, or scale barriers with ease. And this is, I think, a very Daggerheart type thing where sometimes it's rules language and sometimes it's just, if it's within close range, you're supposed to just kind of get there. However, and they just added enough language to sort of suggest, doesn't matter, you can get there. Which is kind of
Yeah.
neat, until someone tries to argue it, but pretty cool.
Right.
And then kick, when you succeed on an attack against a target within melee range, you can mark a stress to kick yourself off of them, dealing an extra 2d6 damage and knocking back either yourself or the target to very close range. So I do my normal attack, and if I succeed, I can choose to mark a stress, either kick off of them dealing that damage or push them back dealing the damage. That's really nice, versatile. I love so cool. I actually ended up not using kick much because I almost always had dealt so much damage to them that more damage wouldn't help. And if I didn't need to kick them off of me or kick myself off, then there was no real reason to it. So that was interesting.
Yep. And what was your community?
Oh, that was Wildborn. So I was from the deep forest. And that grants me Lightfoot. Your movement is naturally silent. You have advantage on rolls to move without being heard. Which awesome for a rogue.
Okay. So my ancestry was orc. I did not get the sweet goat look. I got the tusk look. The orc ancestry gave me sturdy. So when I have 1 hit point remaining, attacks against me have disadvantage.
Huh.
So the game master's rolling twice and taking. Well, no, is it? Well,
I think
don't
for
even know
Game
the
Masters it
rules.
is.
It is roll twice
Because
and
they're doing the
take the lower,
20-sided
right?
die. I think Maybe I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, we haven't even delved into the game master rules
Yeah,
yet,
yeah.
so that's for a later episode. So anyway, that's I figured I'm going to be getting hit a lot as the warrior. Let's put that in, and then tusks. When you succeed on an attack against a target within melee range, you can spend a hope to gore the target with your tusks, dealing an extra 1d6 damage. And that sounded good at first, but I think I used it once because I
Mhm.
rarely hit. And when I did hit, I thought doing 3.5 extra damage is very unlikely to move that attack into the new threshold.
Yeah, yeah.
So I will, and that then that brought the question to mind of, do I roll my normal damage first and say I did 20, I did 16 damage? Does the game master then say, that's pretty close. Do you want to spend a hope to use your tusks? Or
Yeah.
is it, I did 16, let me use the tusk? Or is it, I'm going to use the tusk if I hit, let me roll the d6 along with all the other, right?
Yeah,
It's that
yeah,
question of when do you use it and what slows the game down least? Do we
yeah.
go for the most impactful reading of the rule, which is let me know if I'm close and I'll roll it? Or is it something else?
Yeah, I think the game ends up the majority of the time the game is saying you total everything up, then you find out what it does, right? So like you spend an experience before you make the roll and things like that, not after. But it's I'm not entirely sure if there is guidance on this. It came up during our game a couple of times, and I think Tom Christie said, "Well, I think you need to tell me what all your damage is, and then that becomes the threshold." And then my monster is going to decide what to do. So you really need to kind of find that total first, which, as you said, makes it hard to know.
Yeah. And then my community was orderborn, which means I was born in a community that went by law, right? They were a lawful, organized society. So I was dedicated. I could record three sayings or values of my upbringing that have been instilled into me. And then once progressed, when I describe how I'm embodying one of those principles through my current action, I can roll a d20 rather
Hmm.
than a d12 as my hope die,
Hmm.
which I did quite frequently and still never hit. Uh, but it
Yeah,
was, it
yeah,
was
that's
fun. It was
yeah.
fun to role play and say this, say the thing, and show
Mhm.
how it applied to that situation. It was a good time.
In someone else's hands, Shawn, this could have been very powerful because something that we had happened to us in our second game, I don't think it happened in our first game, maybe, but in our second game, there were a number of monsters that would swap out our dice. So they would say, like,
Mm.
your hope die is a D6 instead of a D12 or something like that. And so you
Oh,
could have gone right back to D20, which would have been really awesome.
gotcha. That's interesting. I was not there for that.
Hmm.
So now we have the basics of our character, really, in terms of heritage, ancestry, community, class, subclass. Now we need to get some character traits. We need to get some ability scores in there.
Hmm.
And so the six traits are agility, strength, finesse, instinct, presence, and knowledge. Little bit of a difference between how we might think of it in D&D here, I believe, Teos. What do you think?
Yeah, when I was at first, you kind of think like, okay, agility is dex, strength is strength, finesse. Wait, finesse, agility, and that's when you start looking and you realize, well, agility is sprint, which we would have called athletics under strength in 5e. Leap, which would be jumping, which would be strength. Maneuver, okay, well, that's more like dex. And then strength is lift, smash, grapple. Finesse is control, hide, tinker. So it is these kind of fine motor skill type things. So that's where you start realizing, oh yeah, there are some differences here, and even between instinct, present, and knowledge, they aren't quite wisdom, charisma, and intelligence. They're a little bit different in time. So it's something that can take a little bit of time. But what's nice is the character sheet does include these names, these little abbreviation, what are prompts, like perceive, sense, navigate for instinct. Those are written on there to help guide you. So it ends up working fine in play. The other thing that's interesting is you're not choosing to like roll 3d6 or anything like that, right?
You just choose the modifier.
Mhm.
So you start with +2, +1, +1, 0, and -1. That's at first level, of course. And then you get to bump, you can bump those up as you level in certain ways. And what I found interesting was, okay, I'm playing a warrior. I thought, well, agility will probably be like avoiding getting hit, and strength will be using my weapon. And that was not the case. Both my weapon and my not being hit score were based on agility, which made
Mm.
strength oddly a bit more of a dump stat than it would normally be, at least thinking in terms of agility being one thing and strength being another.
Yeah, this is a case where this could really be great. Um, it's going to take play for me to figure it out. And I
Mm.
like testing systems, so I thought, okay, my rogue, I've got this princess concept going. She's very charismatic. So in D&D, if I want to make a charisma rogue, I still need some dex, right? Because I mean, that's going to
Right.
be all the things. It's going to be my armor class. It's going to
Yep.
be my attacking. It's going to be, all of it. Skills. Here, not necessarily. Like, yeah, skill type things will still go off of the usual kind of things that the game expects, but I decided to choose presence as my +2. And later when we talk about equipment, we'll see that actually worked out just fine. So I
Mhm.
went +2 presence, +1 finesse and agility, and then my dump was strength at -1. And that was actually surprisingly easy to work with, maybe even ideal at level 6, but it wasn't at the tier below that I found when I was trying to look at gear and stuff. So found that was interesting. So it's going to
Yeah.
take some play, I think, for me to decide how much I like that it's this flexible. Like, it's probably good, but maybe it has some unintended, you know, things that should matter don't. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, the numbers are still, even after leveling. So I got up obviously level 6 with this, and I was still at +3 was my high, and I still
Yeah.
had a -1 in there. So it's more about the dice, I would say, in that sense. Well, at least in my
Yeah.
experience, it
Well,
was.
yeah. I mean, you're rolling two 12s to get to a total to try to hit a DC. And
Yeah.
so the pluses are pretty small, but the potential is there that, these D12s will add up to bigger numbers. Of course,
Mhm.
you showed us how that need not be the case.
Or lower numbers.
Yeah.
In some cases. So we got those ability scores, and then there was the information, the additional information that came from those ability scores and your equipment and your classes and so on and so on. So evasion is the information that tells you how hard it is to hit you,
Yeah.
similar to your armor class. This is set by your class and then modified by other factors. You
Mhm.
also have hit points, which count as hit points, like you would in D&D or other similar games to D&D, although you have many fewer than you would in
Yeah.
D&D. And then you have stress. So this is sort of a mental or
Hmm.
even slightly physical measurement of something other than just physical health.
Yeah. It's
Those are
so
also class
interesting.
specific. Yeah.
It's so interesting to consider those because at level 1, you're like, oh, okay, my hit points are 3. That's not that different than D&D. But then you might be at level 6 and still be 3. Or you might be at
Mhm.
5 or 6, but you're not going to be at 30 or 40 or whatever, D&D type numbers because of the work that thresholds do on your armor side, which we'll get into. So it's a really big sea change, and mentally is hard to kind of always figure out when you're starting out.
Yep. And then you will start an adventure or after a long rest with two hope.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
you have a
what was your rogue?
maximum number of 6 that you can have at any one time. So you
6
start
hope.
with
Yeah.
2, and then you can spend or gain them depending on how you roll and what other things go on. Yeah.
Yep. So your rogue, what did she look like at the start?
So starting evasion of 12, I had 6 hit points. Wait, is that right? 6 sounds
Maybe
high.
started with 6?
Let me see. I'll take a look here at my
As a warrior, I started with 6 hit points, but
okay,
by the time I reached 6th level, I had gotten up to 9 hit points.
nice.
My starting evasion was 11, but I got up
Yeah,
to
6.
12 at level 6 with a -1 from my evasion because of my armor.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, so I did starting evasion 12, 6 hit points. And I had boosted those a fair bit over time, where I actually felt like I was one of the harder to hit characters, and pretty reasonable at handling damage.
All right. So we're set there. Now we can talk about the starting equipment. Your primary weapon is generally in your main hand, used for attacks. If you have a free hand, you can use a secondary weapon that's used for attacks, or boost your main hand damage with those
Mm-hmm.
attacks.
Mm-hmm.
What about shields?
Yeah, so the shields are generally going to be your secondary, what's it called? Your secondary weapon slot, and that will then boost your armor scores at the expense of doing more damage. And I think that the big example I would use is like this small dagger, which is a clever way to handle two weapon fighting. Is that instead of getting into all this business of this weapon, that weapon, whatever, when I, as a rogue, in fact, the recommended loadout for the rogue to start with is you choose a dagger in your main hand and a small dagger in your secondary slot. And what that does is the dagger is d8 plus 1 physical damage. The small dagger gives plus 2 extra damage. So I'm still just making that one attack roll, but because I have this secondary, I'm doing d8 plus 3 instead of d8 plus 1 damage. Very simple, nice, elegant way to handle it. But I can trade that off, right? I could say, well, I'm not going to do a secondary. I'm going to do a shield. So I forego those 2 points of damage and maybe boost my evasion up a bit. Or I could do something like, the whip that lets me like move people away from me, or, a lot of other options like that are kind of neat, or a two-handed attack, And rogue is something we think of in D&D as like, well, you got to choose, a light weapon and this and that and the other. And like, no, you can do a battle axe or a heavy framed wheelchair or a heavy warhammer. And there are a lot of these kinds of options, like, the heavy framed wheelchair and the heavy warhammer are D12 plus 3, but a -1 to evasion. So there are these kind of properties, or I think they're called features, that weapons have that can be either a boon or not. Like some of them can give you like a +1 to your evasion, or +1 even to a trait. And that's kind of useful.
Yep. So let's talk about proficiency for just a second, because it's very different in Daggerheart than it is in D&D or D&D-like games. What proficiency does is it increases the number of dice of damage that you can roll with a weapon. Because I was a 6th level character, I was able to get my proficiency up to 4, which means rather than rolling 1d8 for my longsword, I was rolling 4d8 damage for my longsword.
Yeah, proficiency is interesting. It has nothing to do with what weapon you can use. The only thing that says that you can or can't use a weapon is if you don't have a spellcasting trait, then you can't use the magic weapons. But a lot of classes do, like even the rogue has one, and so I could use a staff or a scepter or a wand if I felt like it. And kind of like with my working with presence, you can be completely viable in doing this, which is sort of interesting. There's a lot of, I'm curious whether over time one would find that this intrudes on other characters, or if it just doesn't matter because doesn't kind of matter that way. So I had built this presence path, right? I'd gone with presence. I'm leaning into the charisma side of things. And so I found that, if I use the dagger, well, it uses finesse, right? So I'm a +1 to attack. Sure would be great if I could use presence. So let's look at the weapon list for starting off. And oh, hey, look, the cutlass. Cutlass uses presence, deals d8 plus 1. So it actually works just the same. Or the rapier does d8 damage. So I lose 1 point of damage from my previous default load. But I can also mark a stress at any time to target another creature within range with my weapon.
Right.
So there are these kinds of little trade-offs, but you actually can make a different ability score work pretty well because of this. You don't have tons of options, but you there are enough options there to support that. Yeah. How about you?
My main thought was on the armor. So it gave me, as I was building this character, the warrior, 3 choices for armor. And it was essentially really heavy armor, sort of heavy armor, and then lighter armor. And the super heavy armor would have given me a -2 to my evasion. but given me obviously better armor to avoid damage once I'm hit. Then there was the lighter armor where it actually boosted my evasion, but gave me less threshold for taking damage. So I chose the middle ground, the chainmail, which gave me a -1 to my evasion, but gave me a decent set of thresholds and choices for marking armor to reduce damage.
This reminded me of Pirate Borg. In Pirate Borg, the better armors make you easier to hit. So, like the plate mail type stuff, it's actually a lot easier to get hit, but then you get to roll to sort of get rid of the dice of damage that have just been, the damage totals have been inflicted to you. So, you have a chance to kind of absorb that up with your armor and not get hurt after it's all said and done. So, it's a little longer of a process, but actually quite effective, though close enough that a lot of times people will say, I'm sick of getting hit so often. I'm going to go with a different armor, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. And this is sort of that, I think maybe even less tangible, where it's like, I'm going to get hit more often, but my thresholds are higher. So the chance that it's a serious wound is lower. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting, it's like a hard to figure out calculus. Someone should do a whole math analysis, and I'm sure we'll then know all the answers. But
I'm sure it will happen at some point. Mm-hmm. And then you also get some starting inventory items like a rope, torch, tent and bedroll, a handful of gold, a minor health potion or a stamina potion. So health clears your hit points and stamina clears your stress.
Yeah.
And then each class will have individual choices, like what you want to use to cast spells or other things like that.
And mine had, do you want a set of, what was it, thieves tools or something else? It's and yeah, it was like a choice. Oh, grappling hook or forgery tools. That was my choice. So, like, okay, I'll go with forgery tools. I'm probably the kind of character that was getting out of class and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't remember any like peculiar choices like that. Mm-hmm. It was more a big long list of what weapon do you want, and then this list of 3 or 4 armors that you want. And it was odd because I had something from my class called Weapon Specialist. You can wield multiple weapons with dangerous ease. When you succeed on an attack, you can spend a hope to add one of the damage dice from your secondary weapon to the damage roll. Additionally, once per long rest, when you roll your Slayer die, you can reroll any ones. But I could not get that weapon in my second hand to figure out how to use it. So it was sort of a strange thing.
So I guess that means the warrior, so you could have a 2-handed weapon in one hand, in theory, a shield in your other. So that's a really nice benefit. Or you could have another weapon, and sort of the way the small dagger does, you could get this boost to damage off of it if you chose. It's kind of neat. I dig the concept. I did look up your item choice is the drawing of a lever or a sharpening stone.
Sharpening stone.
That's really funny.
Yep. That is cool. Yeah. And my character was all about the sharpening stones, let me tell you. But I also noticed, since we were playing 6th level characters, they had different tier weapons. Yes. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. So I chose a Tier 1 longsword, and then I saw, a Tier 3 longsword, so I chose that. But I never equipped the Tier 3 longsword.
Oh, well, that hurt.
So I was doing like 4d8 plus 9 damage when I should have been doing 2d8 or 4d8 plus 15 damage.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of, we'll talk about leveling next time, but I was going way too fast and missed out on some nuances that I should have slowed down.
I started that way too, and that's where actually the most time I spent on character creation was because we were level 6, looking at all the different tiers, because sometimes the lower tiers were kind of enticing too, but that's where you can enjoy if you like making lots of choices and reading through all the things, that weapons is where I think you get a lot of that enjoyment. Otherwise you can just go with the defaults, and if we weren't doing a level 6 adventure like this, we would probably be getting these options over time, and then it would be a lot easier. So
for sure. Okay, so step 7 after, whoops, I skipped a
Or
step. Let's go
6?
back. Step 6 is the background. So there were several questions provided that you could fill out based on your class. What were your rogue background questions,
So it
Teos?
was, what did you get caught doing that got you exiled from your home community? That was perfect. So I said, in bed with a servant on my wedding day. You used to have a different life, but you've tried to leave it behind. Who from your past is still chasing you? And who from your past are you most sad to say goodbye to? And that one I chose to have a sort of mentor that believed in me and kept trying to teach me the right lessons in life, even when I wasn't listening time after time. And so they're very dear to me. So I answered 2 out of my 3 questions. And they kind of say, like, this is to help you. You don't have to answer any of these. You can come up with your own questions, whatever.
Yep. And mine was, as a warrior, who taught you how to fight and why did they stay behind when you left? Somebody defeated you in a battle years ago and left you to die. Who was it and how did they betray you?
Mm,
And what legendary place have you always wanted to visit and why is it so special?
that's cool.
So,
Yeah, neat.
uh, step 7 are experiences. So you get to pick at first level 2 experiences that give you a +2 bonus when you spend a hope to add them to a die roll. It could be a background like blacksmith or assassin, a characteristic like charming lone wolf, specialties like acrobat or sharpshooter, skills like deadly aim or photographic memory, or even just phrases like fake it till you make it or I won't let you down.
Yeah. This is very 13th age, right? And
Yep.
13th age
Yep.
has no skills. You just sort of say, like, I was a circus performer. And then later you kind of ask the DM, hey, can I apply circus performer here? Because I'm trying to walk this tightrope. Sure. Here, they do a nice piece, which is instead of having you justify it with the DM, it's
Mhm.
sort of always justified, is the way I read it. But
Yeah.
because you're spending a hope, that's the part that has a cost to it. So you're not going to just exploit it every time and say, well, I get +2 to
Right.
that. And because we got the spend, now it can be very wide. So you can say that this is like, deadly sharpshooter sounds like something that is broken, except you're going to have to spend a hope to do it. So if you want to spend that hope to get +2 to your attack, you can do it every time until you're out of it, which is kind of cool.
Yep. And that's the way you meld a narrative game and a storytelling, or a game and a narrative creation engine to make it
Yeah.
both.
And
And
rules matter because
and
these are
rules
rules.
indeed
Yeah.
do matter.
Hmm.
So, what was your concept as this princess?
Yeah. So, I mean, I went with exiled princess because I thought that would be kind of a neat thing where I could, if I'm dealing with like everyday folk, the little people like you, I could, lean into that. There are a lot of ways where if I'm dealing with nobility, that would be pretty useful. And then everybody wants to be seduced by me because she has just gone through life with nothing but, everybody just falls heads over heels for her. And so that just, anytime I'm trying to talk people into things, I wanted to have that boost to do that.
And my concept was an orc whose father ran an orphanage and whose mother, the orphanage was for like military uh, orphans whose
Wow.
parents went off to fight,
Mm,
or adventurers, and my mother protected the town as a warrior. So mine was experienced armorsmith and protector of the young and feeble. And
nice.
again, everyone compared to me was young and or feeble. So,
Perfect.
I was always trying to protect them. And then once counters were over, I already had something that would help repair armor. So I
Mhm.
would just use that along the way.
Nice.
And last but not least, or almost last, but certainly not least because it's important, are the domain cards. So your class has 2 domain types, and sometimes you will share one domain type with another class, but no class has the same 2 domain types. What was your domain as or domains as a rogue?
Yeah, so Rogue is Midnight and Grace, and they each have like different colors on the cards and different symbols. I'm holding up 2 cards here. Um, there are more domains already in the playtest. So, like the Warlock has a different type of domain that doesn't exist. So, even though you see like a beautiful chart that shows like how every class has, 2 domains shared by 2 classes that are adjacent to it on this like pie type circle, more are coming. And I would guess that we're going to get more cards because at level 1, you have like 6 cards to choose from. But then all the levels after that have fewer options. There are just, I think, 2 of each card to choose from. And I found sometimes at some of the higher levels, I was like, I really don't know what to choose. Like, I don't know how this helps me. Well, I'll just pick this one, right? So we'll talk more about that when leveling. But at level 1, I went with inspirational words, where my speech is imbued with power. After a long rest, I place a number of tokens on this card. So I ended up, putting a die on my card equal to my presence. So that's +2 at level 1. When I speak with an ally, I can spend a token from this card to give them 1 benefit from the following options: clear stress, clear a hit point, gain a hope. And then when you take a long rest, they all go away. And that was very useful, very versatile. So I went with that. And then pick and pull is advantage on action rolls to pick non-magical locks, disarm non-magical traps, or steal items from a target. And that just felt like, oh yeah, cover the rogue stuff. The other thing that's neat about it is these cards all have like a little like electricity type icon in the top. What is that? That's the right side. And that number is later in the game. You have to only have but so many cards. I think it's 5. I might be right. And so you'll have more cards than you can have in your loadout. And at a rest, you can freely swap them around. But if you want to do it during the game, you have to pay that little lightning cost in stress. Pick and pull is stress 0. So it was very easy that I can always swap it in the moment I need it to go deal with a trap or whatever thing. And then if I want to swap back to the other one, then I pay the cost of the other card that I want to pull back. And so that was a nice economic way to do that. So I like that interaction.
That is nice. My 2 domains were blade and bone. So of the 6, my 2 choices were pretty much the simplest ones I could find. Not good enough is when you roll your damage dice, you can re-roll any 1s or 2s. So
cool.
Pretty simple, straightforward. Whirlwind, when you make a successful attack against a target within very close range. So I didn't even have to be in melee. I could be in very close range. I could spend a hope to use the attack against all other targets within very close range. All additional adversaries you succeed against with this ability take half damage. So this is a little weird to me because I think I was playing it wrong. Because I would be up against meleeing with one target with a longsword, and I would use it, and then I would say whirlwind because there's somebody else within very close range, but my weapon wasn't very close range, it was melee. So and I might even be getting that wrong, but it plays with that idea of when you make a successful attack against a target within very close range,
which melee is.
But I can't make an attack with this weapon maybe against someone with very close range.
Yeah.
Unless maybe I missed. Yeah, anyway.
So I guess the idea is if you were playing a character with a either longer range weapon like a halberd, or if you were using, say, a bow, then you could still do this. It doesn't have to be melee.
Let's see. Range,
but your melee weapon would still work, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, it was one of those times where I started. Otherwise, the rules seem to flow pretty well, but that one I'm trying to parse.
I thought the ranges confused all of us a fair bit in our 2 games. Like you have to go, wait a minute, okay, very close. Very close sounds like it's right there, but it's not melee. It's the next band out. And then close is after that, and then far. And so it takes time to get used to it. And we were definitely tripped up by that a lot.
And step 9, finally, is connections. You have a set of questions broken up by class. And the idea is that you talk about your character, and then someone chooses within your group to answer one of your questions, creating that connection. So similar to the Fate, they're similar to a lot of different more indie games where you make these connections with the rest of your group as part of the game process as you create characters. What were your connections as the rogue?
So the possible questions for people to answer, and I think only Andrew Bishkinsky answered this, but what did I recently convince you to do that got us both in trouble? What have I discovered about your past that I hold secret from the others? Who do you know from my past, and how have they influenced your feelings about me? What I found was interesting that these are fine. They require you to sort of really share your concept and for everybody to really hear it. Then think about these questions and pick it. It's a little bit awkward. Like if you imagine doing this around the table, it's sort of a lot to process. And there's no mechanical weight, which I was surprised. I would have thought that it would have automatically say granted advantage in a situation, or when you use this, get hope. Like other systems like this, like say Night's Black Agents, where it has the relationships. I forget exactly what the term is between characters. Then you can do things that boost the other person because you've got this, connection. Yeah. And there's nothing mechanically here. And I thought, I don't know why. Like, I think it could have used one, but it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love these questions. These could all be part of any session 0 for any game that you play, if it's not already in the rules. But yeah, like you said, I was like, okay. And okay, that's it. Because I didn't even do this part with anyone in the group.
Right.
And we could still play the game. So
yeah.
It's a little
it's interesting that at some point we'll talk about the campaign side of things. And I would have liked for this step to tie into either the campaign frame or the world building part of it, campaign world building part. And it doesn't, which I sort of understand, because the more you link it to those things that are kind of optional, now you're putting a burden. But there's some real, to me, that would be a much greater payoff. If the question was something like, put a place on the map, you met here. What was going? Something like that has a lot more story potential, but it may not be for every group. So I can see why they maybe dialed it down. Yeah. But I would have liked, for me, I would want to change this to lean into the campaign more.
Yep. I agree. If we get but you guys don't understand, this is a storytelling game. This is a narrative game. This is one of those places where if you do a mechanical thing, then it does become a storytelling game as opposed to just a storytelling thing.
Yeah. And I mean, and people respond to incentives, right? I mean, this just and it's a game. Game has fun things to it. It's that satisfaction, that payoff, right? It can just be narrative, but it's fun when it carries a little something in the scene, and
for sure. So next time we talk about Daggerheart, we will talk about leveling up and some other aspects. But for now, we need to mosey on into the sunset. And I want to, before I turn the lights out here, thank everybody for listening. Thank our Patreon supporters, our Master of Dungeons supporters, our Master of Realms supporters, and our Masters of the Multiverse. Let's do the name mangling. It's time. Agile Monk of Fantasy Campaign Workshops, Keith Hammond of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Dave Bastiansen, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Calvin Bridges of Alos, Robo Ballin, Kevin Griswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimble Co., Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at NerdRonomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, William Harshman of Runeforge Tabletop Gaming, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Sean Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG Podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JL at Tileforge, JR of the Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, John Mickey, Mighty Zeus, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson, creator of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from Page, the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacles Squelching Wetly, Post-Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prunner from Croatia, Pugnus, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Samonsa. Good to see you, Krishna. Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games. Josh and Lee Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast. Talos the Stormlord. Jeremy Talaman from D&D and TV podcast. Therese, Joe Tyler, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM. James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Wozniak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Zach Types, and Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you for your support. If you enjoy the show, and if you have it in you, you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd and give us a little boost. You can also help by going to anywhere that you listen to the podcast and giving us a review. Give us the stars. You can also go to YouTube. Yeah, that's where you see our faces here, YouTube. And leave a comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. We really do appreciate it. Teos, what have you been up to on your socials?
Ooh, I have been writing an article about the concept of people like Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins being big stars. So at alphastream.org, I wrote an article about this and why I think it's totally okay, even if someday they might go off to a Darrington Press or other company or whatever.
There you go. You can find my stuff on the socials at Shawn Merwin, and you can also follow the podcast on the socials at Mastering D&D. We have made it through character creation process. We'll be leveling up soon. What are we going to do now?
I'm going to go off and ponder about how if this video had been part of the fan content agreement with Darrington Press, I wouldn't be able to show you these cards. But because we're just using no agreement, we can show them to you.
It's a true story. And I'm going to go see how to hold a longsword in one hand and try to do something with the other useful.
Okay, so repair is in your future.
Exactly. Small dagger in my future. Not a big dagger, small dagger.